One of my favorite musicals is Fiddler on the Roof. The story of Tevye as he wrestles with tradition and faith and change. Complicated issues. His daughters marrying men who on one hand they approve of, but then in other cases they don't approve of, and how hard that is in the little village of Anatevka for all these issues to be clashing at a certain time in life. In the Hebrew way, a lot of times Tevye is discussing things either out loud with God as he walks around, or sometimes in the city gates where the men of the village would gather to discuss things. And in one of my favorite scenes, Tevye is there with the men of the village. And they're talking about the czar and what they're going to do about the czar. And somebody in this says, the czar is a good man. And Tevye says, he's right. And then somebody says, no, the czar is a bad man. And Tevye says, he's right too. And then somebody else raises their hand and says, Tevye, they can't both be right. And he says, you're right too. This is the complex, complicated way that the Hebrew way of thinking goes. It's embracing things that seem to be opposites and then recognizing the truth in both of them so that it's not an either or. It's a weird, complicated blend of the two. They're both simultaneously true. It's called an oxymoron or a paradox. You get it. You know how this works in everyday life. When we were singing a while back, to the wonders here that I confess my worth and my unworthiness. Wait a minute. Are we saying that we're worth Christ's sacrifice? Yes. Are we saying we're unworthy of Christ's sacrifice? Yes. Wait a minute, Tevye. They can't both be true. You're right too. See? The truth is in not just this or not just that. And so when we get comfortable with this way of thinking, the wisdom literature of the Old Testament starts to make sense to us. I often give the example of Proverbs 26:4, which says, answer a fool according to his folly. In other words, challenge foolishness and confront it. And the next verse says, don't answer a fool according to his folly, or you will become like him. And God has the audacity to put those verses back to back, so that in your Western way of thinking you go, well, now wait, which is it? Those are opposites. And God says, yes. Isn't it beautiful? Sometimes you answer a fool and challenge him. Sometimes you don't answer a fool. You let it go. So if we're looking for exact technique in how to live, don't go to the wisdom literature. It's going to tell you the complication of life and how a person of discernment learns the right time and the right season. There is a season for answering a fool. There is a season for letting the fool be a fool. How do you know? Wisdom. Wisdom. Okay? Now, once we have that way of thinking, then this passage and a lot of the others kind of come into line. So chapter 3 starts. There's an appointed time for everything, a right time, a timely time for everything that fits. And there is a time for every matter under heaven. And then he talks about the extremities of life's experiences. That appointed word is an important one. It's coming from God. He is appointing a time. So it's not like we wake up in the morning and go, today's a day for this. I'm going to make this happen. It's more of a sensing a season and knowing what God is doing. Sensing what God is doing. Like, take the first example. You don't decide when you're going to give birth. Mostly. There's a few exceptions where you can, because of a cesarean, you can kind of, the day of that you're going to give birth. But the child doesn't know when it's going to be born, and you certainly don't know when you're going to die. So that sets the mood. These are things that you can't control. They come to you, but you're having to adapt to them. You're not making them happen. So it's the same spirit in all of these. A time to plant, a time to uproot what is planted. We were out on the work day working out front here on these beds, and Dana and who else was out there?
Man.
Yes, we were fighting those things. They are barren strawberries. Somehow they got planted, and it was a time to uproot what has been planted. So with a lot of difficulty, you're trying to take out something that at one point was carefully planted. I do the same thing at home all the time. So a thing that at one time was good and right is now not the right time or season. A time to kill, a time to heal. You'll notice in all of these, there's a thread that says you can either build it up or tear it down. It's kind of the feel. A time to tear up and build down, and the same thing. A time, and then in verse 4 it changes. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Those first verses 2 and 3 talk about an ending of something that has been built. Even the things that were carefully constructed have a lifespan and will end, just like our human bodies, carefully constructed, and yet they have a lifespan, and they will be broken down and end. All organizations have a beginning and an end. Montgomery Ward's became the first giant mass retailer in the country. No one ever thought Montgomery Ward's would end, and Sears knocked them out of competition. And when Sears took over, everybody thought, well, no one can ever touch Sears. They're at the top of the heap. Remember all those catalogs we used to get? Yeah. And then a time came and went, and Kmart came along and knocked off Sears. And then Kmart was at the top of the heap, and then Walmart came along and knocked off Kmart. And then Amazon came along and is in the process of knocking down Walmart. It'll take a while, and then something will come along and knock down Amazon. Every organization has a lifespan. Churches do too. I did some research on this. You know what the average age lifespan of a church is? It's very close to human lifespan. So in your 20s as a church, you're still rough and ready, bring it on kind of a thing. That's where we are. We're still 22, They say at about 30, you peak. The average church will peak in its vitality impact at about 30. Then you have a couple years of midlife as a church. That's when you do a gymnasium, because you think, we gotta do something big. And so you do a gymnasium or something like that. And then in midlife, and then eventually, like all things, a church starts to age, times change, emphasis changes, and you've all seen churches that have come to the end of their lifespan. Even things that God builds up, He allows them to come to the end of their time. This year in our country, about 4,000 churches will close. On the average, about every year, 4,000 close. About 3,800 on average are planted and started. But only a third of those are going to survive past 3 years. So overall, if you look at the trends, both in the Catholic and the mainline, especially mainline Protestant and Catholic, there's a diminishing lifespan of churches. And they are, like our population, there are so many old ones that are coming to the end of their lifespan. In the Youngstown Diocese, which is what this area is, 9 parishes closed last year, just in Youngstown Diocese. United Methodist churches are merging and closing all over the country. So, even things that God had a time for, that God built up, there's a time for even those to come to an end. And this is where the teacher tells us there's a cycle in things. There's a cycle in things, Ironically, at one time, when John and Charles Wesley initiated the Methodist Church, it was the hottest thing in town. In 1734, it took them a while to get it going, but there was a time when the cutting edge on strategy and technique and missions, the Methodists were it. They were like the new thing. But everything that's new ages and comes around, and something else comes along and renews it. So if a church makes it to 60 or 70, it either is going to go through a couple of decades of decline, or something has to come along and totally renovate it in some way. Merging with another church, something like that. All things have a time, and then a time when they wear out. And this is like the wise person understands this. There's an appointed time. I remember in one of the Tyler Perry movies, I don't remember the context, but there's a mother having a discussion with her daughter-in-law, and she says to her daughter-in-law, "Honey, you are working so hard to build up something that God himself is trying to tear down." And it was kind of a blunt way of saying, even God allows things to come to the end of their life. And that's what we see here. And emotionally, that brings a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. There's a season for those. There's a book I have called The Lost Art of Sadness. And it talks about in our culture, we're so uncomfortable with sadness that if anybody is sad for longer than 2 weeks, we think something horrible has gone wrong. You know what? They need something. They need change, therapy, something. And it's saying no. There are many things in life where the correct response is to feel sad. There's a time for sadness. It doesn't mean your faith is weak. It doesn't mean you're disobeying God. There is a season for sadness and for mourning. It's hard work to mourn well. And there's also a time where God comes along and brings a time for laughter again and a time to dance when you thought you never would dance again. A season comes along. The season changes and you sense God's hand in it. A time to throw stones, gather stones, embrace, shun embracing, those all have to do with physical relationships. The stones is actually a metaphor for sex. That's done in a sort of like, discreet way, but that's the metaphor. I don't know why throwing stones fits that, but that's what they say. And then a time to embrace. So if you're either a hugger or not a hugger. If you're not a hugger, there's never a time to embrace. Right? Don't hug. If you're a hugger, then you're like, what's wrong with hugging? Everybody gets a hug. And so, it's kind of a difference in taste that way. But there's a season. You ever hear someone read the room? They read the room. When you read the room, you sense there's a mood in a room. It's not time to tell a joke. I make that mistake sometimes. I don't always read the room, okay? But there's a season, a timeliness to things. And then if you've ever looked for something and had to give it up as lost, you got to the point where you said, you're fighting it, and you're looking and looking and looking. You've swept the house 9 times. You've gone through the trash piece by piece. You ever done that? That's a lot of fun. And finally, you get to the point where you go, all right, I've done everything I can do. It's gone. I don't want to admit it, but I can't search through the trash anymore. It's gone. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life sitting in that trash, looking for that lost thing, right? There's a time to surrender, give it up, time to keep, time to throw away. How many of you have a hard time throwing things away? I do. I keep threatening to go through my closet and clean out half the things. I'm going to do it, Karen, I really am. But then I get there and I go, oh, Kyle got me this sweatshirt. I can't get rid of that. And then I go, oh, I've had this since Denver. I can't get rid of that. There's a time to let it go. Let it go. I'm telling myself this. Let it go. The thing that you value is the person. And if I throw away the sweatshirt Kyle gave me, Kyle does not die at that time. He's still alive. I can still call him. He can still come. The important thing doesn't change. But we will drown in our stuff if we can't learn to let go of things. By the way, Kyle would say amen if he was here. He threw away the coolest bag of stuff. But he thought he threw it away. I grabbed it. It's got cool stuff in there. It's like a treasure chest. He doesn't know yet that I still have it. Time to tear apart, a time to sew together, a time to be silent. Boy, this is the time to be silent and a time to speak. How do you know which is which? God, give me the wisdom. The rule of thumb is, if you're afraid to say something, probably be a good idea to do so. And if you're afraid you can't keep your mouth shut, probably be a good time to do so. Right? If your temptation is to talk in every situation, shut your mouth. Try it. See if it works. On the other hand, if you're afraid to say anything that might ruffle a feather, speak, man, speak. Okay? There's a time to love, a time to hate. What's a time to hate? I hate abuse. I hate starvation. Spiders. Disease. Violent crime. There's a time to hate. Exploitation of children. There's a time to hate. And a time to love. A time for war and a time for peace. We certainly are called by God to be advocates of peace. And yet there is a time to hold the line and to say, on this I don't bend, on this hill I die, and if it costs me my life, I will take that stand. There is a time not to bend, and there's a time to negotiate and accommodate. How do you know which is which? God, give me the wisdom. Sometimes you bend, sometimes you don't bend. And then the last one, you would think the next one coming is a time to work and a time to rest, right? I mean, he's talked about work so much. I looked through the list. There's nothing about work. Oh, there is. What benefit is there for the worker from that which with he labors? Basically, it's a pain in the neck. I have seen the task which God has given the sons mankind with which to occupy themselves. It's like he is so frustrated with how work is pointless that he can't even bring himself to say there's a time to work and a time to rest. It's like, it's vexing. This whole work thing is just frustrating and pointless. That's where he is when he's writing this. So he doesn't say there's a time to work until later, until he deals with something. And then the verse, he has made everything beautiful or appropriate in its time. In all of these things, even times of mourning and times of giving up and times of loss, there's a beauty in it as it comes from the hand of God. It's an appropriate thing. And that there's no possibility that we will find out the work which God has done from the beginning to the end. Even though he has put, and get this, eternity in our hearts. In a little bit, he's going to say how similar we are to animals, that we die just like they do. We work hard and die. They work hard and die. There's no escaping it. Like we don't have any advantage over animals, except right here we do. He put eternity in our hearts. That your dog does not have eternity in his heart. Sorry. Dogs live entirely in the present. They have no awareness, no self-consciousness in terms of like a yesterday or a 3 years from now. Dogs live entirely in the present. They don't have, and God has given us the ability to record the present and call it the past, to have expectation for the future, even though it hasn't come yet, and to call it the future. We understand how complex time is. This is what's part of what separates us from animals, that and language, is that we have the ability to sense something, a bigger picture beyond past, present, and future. We understand that those are human constructs. You know how when you sit through a long sermon, it feels like 3 hours? and yet, when you sit through an exciting Cavs game, it feels like an hour because you're so caught up in the game, right? So time itself has a phenomenological sense to it. It's not even, an hour is not an hour, is not an hour. It feels even different. God has put eternity in our hearts. We have the ability to kind of see what it would be like to zoom out and see the whole picture, and yet God says, I'm going to give you the sense that the big picture is there, but I'm not going to show you what it is. What? Wait a minute. Let's just be like dogs then. I don't want to have eternity in my heart if you're not going to show me the whole picture. No, that's not how it works. I'm going to give you the sense that there is a big picture. Okay? Yes, Lord. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. And this is the battle of human nature as we realize God has equipped us to see more than just the present, and yet He's not going to tell us what's to come. He's not going to show it to us. There's that age-old debate. If you knew how many days you had left and you could find that out, would you want to know? And almost everybody says, no, I wouldn't want to. I'd just be paralyzed counting time then. We know we don't want to live that way. And yet part of us says, Lord, show me what's to come. Show me what's to come. No, I'm not going to do it. There is nothing better than to rejoice and do good in one's lifetime. And every person who eats and drinks and sees good in all his labor, hey, this is the gift from God. The gift from God is not showing you the big picture. The gift of God is showing you how to enjoy something He gives us today without knowing what the future is. That's the beauty of it. You don't worship someone you can control. You only worship that which is beyond you, which you can't control. Think of it this way. You like to watch your team win. I've been watching the Cavs. It was fun for a while. Not so much fun lately. But think about it this way. Have you ever watched a game that you recorded and you know your team is going to win because somebody told you already, but you still have the game taped, and so you still watch it, right? What are you thinking when you watch that? Your team fumbles. Do you get upset? No, because I know we're going to win. But the other team recovered. I don't care. We're still going to win. I don't know how it's going to work, but I know we're going to win. So when you're watching it and you know the outcome, it's not as much fun. What's really fun is to be there in the stadium not knowing the outcome. Right, Justin? And that fact that you don't know what's coming is what makes the whole thing exciting. I mean, think how boring it would be if the whole stadium gathered and everybody knew in advance what was going to happen. No one would come. It's the sense of not knowing that draws you there. So let me ask you, is living with God more like watching the game already recorded or watching the game live when you don't know what's going to happen? Trick question? It's kind of a Hebrew yes and yes. Here's why. He has told us the end. He just doesn't tell us how He's getting there. It's like He said, your team wins the Super Bowl, but every game is going to be excruciating. So, you lose the first game of the season. Oh, well, I don't care. We're going to win the Super Bowl. You lose the second game. Oh, well, not worried. We're going to win the Super Bowl. You win the third game. See, I knew it. We're going to win. You lose the fourth game. You're now 1-3. How are we going to win the Super Bowl? You lose the fifth game. You're now 1-4. Maybe the prediction is off because this does not feel like a Super Bowl team, right? And yet you've been told your team wins in the end. How long do you keep believing that when all the games that you're playing don't seem to be adding up to that? This is the test of faith. You get to 5 and 7. You say, no team has ever won the Super Bowl at 5 and 7. I guess this is going to be the first time. We're going to win 9 straight. Something like that. So God gives us the excitement of not knowing the future, and yet he balances that with, but I'll tell you the future, but I'm not going to tell you the future. Oh, well, yeah, I'll tell you the future, but I'm not going to tell you the future. This is how we live. God does it so we fear him. That's what it says. Look at verse 14. I know that everything God does will remain forever. You can't add to it. You can't take from it. And so has God worked this way that people will fear him. When we can't control the future, we only have one choice. We say, I know he's good. I know what the end is. And I'm buckling up and hanging on. I don't know what's between now and then. And that causes us, the very uncertainty of that causes us to bow and say, Lord, thou knowest, O Lord, thou knowest. Thou knowest. The uncertainty is what actually drives us to God. And it makes it exciting because you don't know the outcome of today or next week. So, like in a Hebrew sense, you don't know the outcome, but of course you know the outcome, but you don't know the outcome. Welcome to wisdom. Then he talks a lot about, as I mentioned, mortality and God showing us that we're really the same when it comes to death. We're all going to die. We're all going to the grave. And then the last verse, 22, I've seen that nothing is better than when a person is happy in his activities. This is his lot. Interesting term. Lot. Almost picture like a plot, like one of Emily's garden plots. You have your lot. Do you mess with other people's lot? No. That's their plot. You have a plot. You're happy when you stay in your plot. You look at all the other plots, compare their plots with your plot. You have a plot. He gave you this plot. But my plot's not done. You have a plot, a lot. You have a lot. I've given you a lot. I've given you enough vegetables in your lot. Don't compare it with others. There's a simplicity in saying, Lord, thank you for my little lot. It's only 20 by 20. That's probably all I can handle. Some people can handle 60 by 60. Some people can handle an acre. I can handle 20 by 20. That's my lot. That's what I can handle. God gives us all a lot. For who will bring him to see what will occur after him? Nobody. I want to finish with just a little hint in chapter 8. If you jump ahead to chapter 8, there's a curious thing that ties into this. Remember I said Ecclesiastes is looping? So just when you think you've finished a subject, it'll go away for a while and then it comes back again. Look at 8, verse 16. I devoted my mind to know wisdom and to see the business which has been done on the earth, even though one should never sleep day or night. And I saw every work of God, and I concluded that one cannot discover the work which has been done under the sun. Then this last sentence, even though a person laboriously seeks, he will not discover it. And even if the wise person claims to know, he cannot discover. So, we should be cautious about saying, I know what God is doing. Well, maybe. Maybe not. So even if the wise person claims he knows, he doesn't know. It's the kind of mystery that God leaves us with no place to turn except trust. I can't control the future, Lord. But there is a season that comes to me from you. Help me embrace that season. My lot today, what I can handle. You know, it looked like the kingdom of God was coming when Jesus came. The disciples were convinced it was time. The long-promised kingdom of God was coming to earth, and Messiah was here to make it happen. And then everything fell apart. From their perspective, Jesus didn't follow through with what he was supposed to do. From their perspective, the whole kingdom dream crashed and burned after the Last Supper and after that fateful night. From their perspective, how is the end ever going to work? He's gone. And then 3 days later, God reinvents the narrative and says, you see, you couldn't have understood it at the time. But there's a different story being told than what you thought. And now this resurrection is the beginning of a different narrative. And now your story is flipping in a way you never could have anticipated. And the curse is lifted, but not in the way you thought it would. Jesus' own story demonstrates this unpredictable God who always knows and always has our goodness and his glory in mind. We sang that a little earlier. Even what the enemy uses for evil, he turns it for our good. He turns it for our good and for his glory. O Lord, thou knowest, and we don't. As you come to the table, if you want to come to the table, you're always welcome. Any follower of Christ is welcome. Understand these sad seasons and joyful seasons are all from the hand of God, and whatever season you're in, you're welcome at the table. Lord, our minds want so much to figure it out. And when you don't let us, it frustrates us until we learn that you are who you are and we're not. But welcome us to your table, even though we don't know the future. We know today. We know this moment and this time. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the